Throughout history, great emphasis has been placed on competing in sports and the glory obtained through winning. Many ancient cultured groups held competitive games, some of these games lasting days or even weeks. Almost all these events excluded the participation of women, seeing as women were expected to be working at home. Women were often banned from even attending these competitions, ignoring their right to watch the sporting events that had amazing amounts of significance in their culture. The ancient Olympics were no different. In contrast to the ancient games, the Olympics held today have made tremendous progress in appreciating all athletes, despite gender and race. Women have not only begun to compete, but have been dominating the sports world. Unfortunately, it hasn't always been like this. In the 19th century, women and men occupied completely different roles in society. Men were encouraged to live a more social life, one that allowed them to spend time with others outside of work, while women were homebound. Many laws during that time period were designed to make women dependent upon men. In 1882, the Married Women's Property Act was passed. Before this law was passed, the woman's property would have automatically become the property of the husband. In 1890, Wyoming was the first state to grant women the right to vote. Though many women lived the simple, homebound life society expected of them, others were running businesses or households. Even though these women were able to be independent, it was still uncommon for them to have complete and utter control of their lives. Despite the rarity of the situation, it wasn't impossible. Women who lived in more rural areas did much more outside the household. Women had a voice. Though it was small and often ignored, it was there and it was growing. Women like Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lucy Stone, and more were willing to fight for equality between the genders. Alice Milliot believed and fought for this as well, but took a different approach in achieving this goal. She saw an opportunity through sport. Alice Milliot's creation of the Women's World Games, first held in 1920, made it possible for women to participate in sporting events in a socially acceptable setting. These games not only gave women a way to compete, but changed the overall perception of female athletes from something distasteful, to be avoided and embarrassed of, to something admirable and worth pursuing. Alice Milliot was originally inspired to pursue her idea because of the modern Olympics. Pierre de Coubertin was the man that started those Olympics, eventually causing Milliot to achieve her idea for the Women's World Games. Coubertin was born into a family of French nobility on January 1st, 1863. His family's extensive wealth allowed them to travel the world. He was able to witness the athletic events held in places other than France. During his travels, he had realized that French education was focused on the intellectual and lacked anything physical. At the young age of 8, in the year 1871, Coubertin witnessed the Franco-Prussian War, in which his homeland was defeated. As he grew, he came to believe that teaching physical strength was the only way to prepare for, and in turn win wars. Hence his strong discomfort at the lack of physical education. Coubertin saw organized sporting events as a way to promote, praise, and teach physical strength in his homeland. This led to Coubertin sitting down with many influential aristocrats in a boardroom of prosperous sports enthusiasts during an annual meeting of the Union of French Societies of Athletic Sports. Up to that point, women's sports, insofar as they existed at all, were inferior to men's and were always uncompetitive and informal. It was a feat that women had any sports whatsoever. At this US FSA board meeting, Coubertin presented a formal message that would change the course of women in sports in a way that no one could have anticipated. Aside from the fact that a woman's energy was meant to go into maintaining the household and taking care of children, the idea of a woman exerting herself in such ways was considered highly inappropriate. If a woman took part in such events, it could tarnish her reputation. However, sports in general were considerably less popular than they had once been. This is what made Pierre's announcement remarkable. His goal is to revive a long-lost, much-missed ancient Greek tradition, the Olympics. The first modern Olympics that Coubertin held were in 1896 in Athens, Greece. Though bringing back the Olympics was remarkable, it was not remotely exciting in terms of gender equality in athletics, especially for those desirous of competing at international levels. Coubertin once said, "The Olympics is all sports for all people." Of course, this was true, unless you weren't a white male. Throughout his life, Coubertin expressed his strong views against women participating in sports, especially in the Olympics, considering the original purpose behind the modern Olympics was to promote male strength. Women were seen as too fragile and weak. Pierre de Coubertin obviously agreed. He felt that females taking part would be impractical, uninteresting, unaesthetic, and incorrect, something the world would come to reject soundly. However, there was an abrupt change at the 1900 Games. Coubertin miraculously let women participate. The reason? Financial. His shift in rationale was simple. The more seats that could be filled, and the more athletes that participated, the more profit. Coubertin allowing women to the Games was something completely new. It intrigued people, keeping the Games not only relevant, but ahead of their time. The curiosity made the amount of viewers rise a considerable amount, along with the income Coubertin was receiving. In fact, the number of competitors more than quadrupled between the first and second modern games. The first woman to participate, Charlotte Cooper, was one of the leaders in achieving equality for women. She, like Milliot, believed women were capable of everything men could do, athletically speaking. Pierre, on the contrary, continued to express his strong views against women in sports. This explains why he didn't allow women to do more than a select few sports. This lasted for over a decade. In 1920, when Alice Milliot was 33, she decided that was enough. She was dedicated to achieving equality in the sports world. Recently widowed, she found that without her husband, she was much more limited in the amount of athletics she could take part in. While the Olympics continued to let women participate, they offered a select few events. This led to Milliot's creation, the Women's Olympiad. Not only did Alice Milliot pursue her idea of the Women's Olympic Games, but she led a 15-year international campaign for the development of women's sport. Milliot took on the role of the president of the Fédération Sportive Féminine Internationale. After becoming president of the FSFI, 5 continents became affiliated with the organization. Born in the year 1884 in France, Milliot had studied to become a teacher, but had a deep love for sports. She fiercely believed that sport developed personalities and gave young women confidence. This explains her reasoning behind developing the Women's Olympiad. She said, "I came up against a solid wall of refusal, which led directly to the creation of the Women's Olympic Games." In 1920, she held the first Women's Olympic Games. Her intention was to direct the attention of the IOC to the importance of including women in the Olympics. Shortly after the IOC and the president, Pierre de Coubertin, found out about the Women's Olympiad, they forced Milliot to change the name. They claimed she was taking their ideas. While the construction of these games did get a small amount of attention from the IOC, it was nowhere near achieving its goal of getting women the same amount of events as men. The solution? Making the Women's Games take place at the same time as Pierre's Olympics. In 1922, Milliot held her second Women's World Games, formerly known as the Women's Olympiad, in Paris, France. This particular Women's World Games received considerable amounts of attention. Over 15,000 people came to watch. At this point, newspapers were beginning to compare Milliot's success to Coubertin's. Not only that, but Milliot's achievements were beginning to take away from his. She was getting his fans and viewers, as well as taking away income he would have gotten from those fans. Ahead of even promoting masculinity, the purpose behind the modern Olympics was to bring Coubertin income. The popularity of Milliot's games was beginning to take that away. Pierre was left with 2 options: lose mass amounts of money or give women more events. He decided a compromise needed to be made. Milliot would only agree to stop her games if women would be represented on the International Olympic Committee, as well as have more sports added. In a sense, she wanted to merge the 2 games. In order to ensure Coubertin held up his end of the bargain, Milliot refused to disband her games until he complied to at least one of her demands. Following the final Women's World Games in 1934 in London, the deal was made. After Coubertin began integrating more events for women into the Olympics, Milliot disbanded her games. Over the next few years, 22 events were added. That more than doubled what women had before. This led to the participation of the 1960 Olympics being over 20% female. However, it wasn't until the 1980s that women were represented on the IOC board.
Not just a dream, but kind of like, I had it in me. Like, I knew I was going from, like I can remember when I was like 7 or 8 being like, well, yep, we're going to the Olympics. And I had obviously like a rude awakening of how difficult it is to make it, but I knew I wanted to ski race and I loved it. My dad always just supported me and made sure that I loved it. I think that's why I'm still doing it at this age. It's been 16 years, going on 17, and I think that raw love for something has kept me in the sport, and like loving what I do to inspire other people is really cool.
Today, women have accomplished some of the greatest feats of sports in history. These women are strong, not weak, powerful, not fragile. They inspire girls across the nation, showing them they too can be powerful, dominant, strong, formidable, influential, and equal. All of this was due to the Women's World Games, caused by Pierre de Coubertin making an astonishing announcement. The Women's World Games is what gave women the opportunity to participate in the Olympics. Due to Alice Milliot and the hundreds of incredible women that followed her throughout the sports world, women in athletics are respected and nearly considered as equals. Today, in the 2018 Olympics, women participating is approaching 50%. On Team USA, for the most recent Olympic Games, there were 243 athletes at the Games, of which 135 were male competitors and 107 were female. The Women's World Games led us to equality in sports, especially the Olympics.